Hello everyone, now let's get started about the VS Code Jupyter notebooks. In this video, we will learn all the basics about Jupyter notebooks. We will see some of the advanced functionalities of these Jupyter notebook, and because of these functionalities, nowadays these VS Code Jupyter notebooks are becoming a standard in the data science field like Dataviewer. Let's say I have this particular data frame. So with the help of these data viewer, I can explore the data of any data frame or list like objects with a much better visibility. And then we will see how to activate this gather option and how can we explore the code of or any related code of any specific cell. And we will learn how to do a proper debugging of any VS Code cell. And these Jupyter notebooks is even better when you are working with different charts, as you can switch between these charts and as per requirement you can change their positions and you can see zoom in zoom out views of these different charts. So guys, now let's start learning Jupyter notebook in VS Code with practicals. So if you look at, this is how your VS Code interface will look like. So to start working with Jupyter notebooks in VS Code, we need to install some extensions. So let's go in this extension tab and click it over here. And here in this search extensions in marketplace, search this Python extension. And this Python extension, which is provided by Microsoft, is one of the most famous extension available in the VS Code. So let's install this particular extension. And if you will read in this extension, it says the Python extension will automatically install the Pylance and Jupyter extensions. So let's remove this. And if you will see, after installing just one Python extension, we have 4 more other extensions. So this Pylance extension is for raising error alerts, and other 3 extensions are for Jupyter notebooks. So this is the only extension which you required to work in Jupyter notebooks in VS Code. So let's start creating our first Jupyter notebook. So for that, just go to desktop and anywhere in your system where you can navigate this folder and name whatever you feel like, but right now I'm creating a Jupyter notebook tutorial. So I'm giving this name Jupyter, let's say folder, and either you can go to this option when you go to this file folder explorer, or you can go to this toolbar and then go to this file and then go this open folder. So anywhere you can do, either you can tick it on this explorer open folder, or you can go by this file and then open folder and then navigate the folder which we have just created. So we create this folder Jupyter folder. So let's open this particular folder, and this folder now is opened in the VS Code. So now our first task is to create our first Jupyter notebook. So go on this, again this file explorer, and over here on the left hand side you will see this icon, and this is a new file icon. So click it on this icon and give the name of our Jupyter notebook. So let's give the name, let's say first, as this is our first Jupyter notebook, and then give a extension, and this extension is the most important thing. So give the extension name .ipynb, and any extension with the name .ipynb will create a Jupyter notebook. So for now we have created our Jupyter notebook successfully in VS Code. So if you look at this Jupyter notebook is having these cells, and when you will see the cell toolbar, that means this Jupyter notebook is in a edit mode. That means we can write code in this cell. So let's write our first code in this Jupyter notebook. So let's say hello world, and let's run this code. So there are 3 ways we can run the code in these cells. So first thing, if you go on the left hand side of this cell, and this cell should be in a edit mode. And how to know that this cell is in a edit mode? So you will see this cell toolbar, and this cell will be highlighted also a bit. And then on the left hand side, you will see this execute cell option. Let's click it on this option. And one thing we have missed. And what we have missed, that before running these cells, we need to activate our Python kernel. So for that, just go on the right hand side and select the kernel. And before that, you should have installed Python interpreter on your system's path. I hope you have already done that. So let's select the kernel. So try to select the most latest Python interpreter. So I have selected this Python interpreter in the select kernel, and now I can execute this cell. So again, go on this option, execute cell. So we have executed our cell. And if you look at, we did not require a print function to get this output, and this output is a REPR output. So now we have run our first Jupyter Notebook cell successfully, and we have learned that to execute a cell, we need to be in a edit mode. So yeah, and you will see when we ran this cell first time, there was the execution order was 1. Then again when I ran this cell, then now the execution order is 2. So keep these execution order in mind, because these are the important one to work with these Jupyter notebooks. So now we have ran our Jupyter notebook. Now let's create a one more cell in this Jupyter notebook. So there are many ways we can create a cell in a Jupyter notebook. So first, the most easy way, go on this code icon and click it over here. So we have created a new cell below of that particular cell, whichever was in a edit mode. So guys, now add some new code in this cell. So first let's create a variable a, and let's give some value. Let's call this variable a, and then let's declare one more variable b, and then let's call this variable, and now execute this cell with a shortcut, and shortcut is Control and Enter. So let's do that. So if you look at the moment I have applied this shortcut Control and Enter, this cell has executed and we got the output 34. Every object is having a REPR output or a STR output, but whenever we get a output directly from a Jupyter Notebook cell, in that case we get a REPR output, and we only get a output of a object if that object is located in the last line. So if you look at, we had also a object A, but we did not get the output of that object A output. So for majority of the output, REPR or STR output will get through print function is the same, but there are few objects and for them those outputs are different. So let's see with an example that how they are different. So now and do one thing, let's now run like call this print function on this. Yeah, so print a, and again execute the cell, and now execute the cell with a new shortcut, that is shift and enter. And this shift and enter shortcut does two things. One thing, it executes the cell whatever was there in a edit mode, and if there was no cell below of that particular cell, then it will create a new cell and activate, or that means that cell will be active in a edit mode, that new cell which has just created. So now let's import a datetime, datetime module, and let's create a datetime object. So datetime.now, and now let's print this datetime, and let's call this datetime with a Jupyter Notebook or REPR output also. So now if you look at, now we have two outputs of this date object. So one is the str output which we got through this print function, and this is a REPR output. So and we can change them, like if you knows about these outputs. So if you want to see the only REPR output with the print function also, so now when we change this, so we got a REPR output of both. Let's get back. So as if you want to see the with this string output, so let's change this. So now we will see the str output of both of these. So now we know about these output of these Jupyter Notebook cell also. So now let's do one thing. Now let's add a markdown cell, and these Jupyter Notebook cells are two types. One is the code cell where we write a code which we have been working, and now if you look at on these option, you'll see this is the code cell. So when we click on this code cell, we create a code cell, and when we click on these, then we create a markdown cell. So now let's see what are these markdown cell. And before that, make sure that these line numbers are visible in these Jupyter Notebook cells. If not, then go in these options and see that this option is checked in. They show notebook line numbers, as these line numbers are really helpful if there will be an error in your code, or sometimes for a better understanding of your code also. So now let's go on this particular cell, go the edit mode of this cell, click it on this cell. So once you will click it on in a cell, so that cell comes in a edit mode, or that particular cell will be activated. Then go in this cell toolbar and go in these options and go in this insert cell and insert markdown cell above. So now we are not creating a code cell, now we are creating a markdown cell. And if you look at a markdown cell on the right hand side, a markdown is visible over here, whereas in a code cell when we are working, Python was there. So this cell is a markdown cell, and in a markdown cell we don't write codes, instead we use for writing pretty good notes. So let's see that how to write few settings. So and these are number of hashes, then give a space, and you can write 6 number of hashes. Higher the number of hashes, smaller the output will be. So let's say Jupyter tutorial, and execute this cell with a control and enter. So this way we can do some formatting, and then we can write some bullet points. So for bullet point, first write a dash and then give a space and write some text and control and enter. So now you see how we can do some formattings in these markdown cells. So now, and one more thing, whenever you go in these Jupyter Notebook cells like this way, you will see these options over here also. So this way also we can create a code on a markdown cell. So now let's create one more markdown cell, and if you knows about these HTML or CSS, then we can do much more formatting in these markdown cell. So let's see a small example of that, but I'll not go detail in this formatting. For that I'll create a separate video, else this video will go really big longer. So let's go color, and then let's close this down, and then execute this cell and control and enter. So now we have created a pretty good color of a markdown cell. So make sure to do a formatting, that cell must be a markdown cell, not a code cell. And we can create a code cell in a markdown cell and a markdown cell to a code cell. For that, go again in the cell toolbar and go change cell to code. So this way we can change these code, but if you'll execute this cell, we will raise an error because we cannot write such kind of a code in a code cell. For that, a proper code only can be written in a code cell. So again, go and convert this cell in a markdown cell. So guys, now let's learn some more option of this particular Jupyter notebook. So now we have these variables in a Jupyter notebook, and we can see these variables with this option. And then we have this restart option. So whenever you click this restart option, you will see all the variables will be lost, and then we can run all this option. If there is no error in any cell, then all the cell will be executed, and again will create all the variables in this Jupyter notebook. And if you'll see now, after making this restart and this run all the execution order from top to bottom is in this way: 1, then from next cell it will be 2, So that's how we will come in a proper order in this Jupyter notebook. And you will see that you might make this particular mistake, that right now we have created this variable a, and this variable a is in a memory of this Jupyter notebook. So whenever a variable is in the memory, so we can call this variable anywhere in this Jupyter notebook, but never ever call this variable in a cell which is located above of the cell wherever that variable is declared. So for now this variable is declared in this cell, so you should not call this variable in a cell which is located above of that particular cell. So for now it's okay, it does not raise any error. But if you look at, Pylance has already raised with this underline a error alert, because if you will close down this Jupyter notebook, so let me show you. Well, let's close this Jupyter notebook and again go to this VS Code and then again open that particular folder and again run this whole Jupyter notebook. So if you look at, a error has been raised, because what has happened, as execution goes from top to bottom, and when our Jupyter notebook execution contrast came over here in this cell, then it did not find a variable in the memory, so it immediately raised an error. And whenever a error will be raised in this execution order, as our execution order goes from top to bottom, so that execution will be stopped immediately and we will never reach to the cell which is located below. So remember this point, whenever you declare a variable and if you want to call that variable in another cell, that cell must be located below of that particular cell. That cell must not be located above of that particular cell wherever that variable has been declared. So don't make that particular mistake. So guys, now let's start learn the advanced features of a Jupyter notebook in VS Code. So one of the things which I really like working with this Jupyter notebook, that's in a Zen mode. So go to this view and go to this appearance and go in a Zen mode. So now let's explore our first feature. So that's the Dataviewer feature. And if you look at in these variables, right now no variables is visible because of a bug which is right now there in the Jupyter notebook. Because whenever you will write a class object in any cell and run all the cell, then that variable visibility becomes an issue in this Jupyter notebook. So there is a small solution. If you really want to view those variables, then go in any cell and click it on this run by line option and click it on this option. So that will open a run by line kind of a debug mode, and then once that debug mode will be opened, so it will activate a new option, continuous execution. So click it on that option. So now that will exit it out from that mode, but now all the variables are visible. So once we have the visibility of all the variables in this Jupyter notebook, then let's explore this option, Dataviewer. So now we have created a data frame which represents a data of a CSV file, and this is how we used to look the data of a CSV file. But with the help of Dataviewer, we can look this data in a much better manner and we can explore really with a much better visibility this particular data. So let's see what is that and how to activate that Dataviewer. So now we can see all the variables in this Jupyter notebook. So now if you look at, now we have this data frame in the variable list, and this is the type of a data frame, and this is the size. These are the number of rows and these are the number of columns of this data frame. And now on the left hand side you will see this option, and this option is a Dataviewer option. This left hand side option which says represented by two rectangles and one arrow sign, and then click it on this particular option. So this will open the data of this data frame. So now we can view this particular data with a much better visibility, and beyond that it provides the functionalities like we can order this data the way we want. So let's say I don't want to see this data in a not ascending but a descending order, then go over here and click it over here. Now this the data is in a descending order, so we can order this particular data, and beyond that we can apply different filters. So let's say I want to see only movies which were having the runtime more than 100 minutes, so we can apply, and which were in the, let's say, Dutch language. So there was only one movie which was having 100 minute runtime and which was released in a Dutch language. So that's how we can explore the data with these data viewers with a much better manner. And there's one more pretty good functionality. Let's say you are getting this data frame which is connected from a database. Then you have this refresh option, so you can refresh this data again and again. So, and these data viewers not only helps with these data frame but also with the lists also. So here I have created the zones list, and again if you go to variables, and as the variables are not visible because of that bug, because I wrote a class object in these cells, so again go to that thing, run all cells, exit it out from that line by line execution. Now we have all the variables visibility. So we have this li list variable where I have appended all the zones. So click it on this data viewer. So I have all the zones, worldwide zones available, and I want to see the zone of New York. So I have this New York zone history. So now we have seen the data viewer functionality, which is really amazingly good for exploring the different data of different objects. So guys, now let's explore one more powerful feature which has just recently been introduced in these VS Code Jupyter Notebook, that's the gather feature. So what is this gather feature? So let's say I want to see the code which is required to call this particular full name method. So what is this full name method? This is a instance method. So we need this even instance to call this full name method, and to create this even instance we need a class. So I want to see that even instance and then that particular class. So if there are hundreds of lines of code in my Jupyter notebook, then that will be really hard to figure out where this even instance and where I have defined that particular class which is calling this particular even instance. But for now, with this gather functionality, so first thing we need to activate this gather functionality in this VS Code. It doesn't come by default. So first let's go back in a normal mode. So exit it out from the Zen mode and go in the extension, and in the extension type this gather, and you will find a gather extension which is provided by Microsoft. So let's install this particular gather extension. So once this extension will be installed, then you will see in your cell toolbars this gather option has been activated. So now as we are in this particular cell, so whatever the code will be required, the lines to execute in this particular cell, if we will click it on this particular option, this gather code option, so it will create a new Jupyter notebook. But now you will see there is an error. So why that happened? Because I close that particular Jupyter notebook and again I reopen it. So how not to create this particular error? The one method, always run all the Jupyter notebook cells, then call this particular option. So if you'll see, now it has done pretty correct. So now so whatever the code was there in this cell, so all the related code of this particular cell has been come in this particular new Jupyter notebook which has created by that gather option. So now we know how useful this particular gather option is, and that really helps us out when you have hundreds of lines of code and your data science project is gonna really big help. And now let's get back. So now we know what is this gather option and how to activate this particular option. The other thing which is there and which is really powerful, that's the debugging. of these Jupyter notebooks. So, and debugging is a bit different, so like you need to apply a couple of more steps from the normal Python file while doing these debugging. So make sure you do that whenever you do debugging of in these Jupyter notebooks. So let's say I have this for else loop. So if it's pretty new to you guys, then let me explain you a bit like what is this for else loop. So this else statement only run if this break will not be hit, this break statement. If Python will execute this break statement, then this else will not run. So now let's run this code. So now this has run, so this else statement, because we did never reach on this particular break line number 3 because of this if statement. So now let's debug, and I want to see why I did not get the print of this break hit print. So remember these 3 steps before doing debugging. So always make a restart before doing debugging in these Jupyter notebooks. First step. Second thing, always create some breakpoints. And then third step, always go in these options and execute cell above. So once you finish these 3 steps, then only start your debugging in your VS Code Jupyter notebook. And now, and reason being is that like first thing what we did, we restarted, because what will happen if Jupyter notebook will run all the cells, then it will clutter your debugging consoles with too many variables, and even the variables which is not required will be executed, and that will create an issue in your debugging. And then second thing, we did the breakpoints, which is like universal for doing debugging. And third thing, we execute the above cells. And why we did that? So if there was a variable which was required for running this particular code in this cell, so that will come in the memory. So that's the reason we did 3 steps before doing the debugging of this particular Jupyter notebook cell. So now go in this option, then debug cell. So once you click on this debug cell option, then you will see we have full-fledged debugging has opened. So this is not a debugging class, so I'm not gonna tell you about whole debugging, but for that let me know in the comments. I'll create a separate video or that how to do debugging in the VS Code. It's really powerful, so we can watch the different variables in this debugging, and then we can run line by line code executions like this way. So we have these variables. So now we say I is 7 and now I became 10. So that's the reason we never hit this particular line. So now let's get out from that debugging mode, then again go back in the debugging mode. So what you need to do, again go to this debug cell, and this time I'm gonna do debug, changing this value 0 to 13. Then again make a line by line cell execution. Yeah, so this is how you can do all these debugging options. But you know what has happened, because I changed the variable name after starting this debugging mode, so that's the reason it never took this 0 to 13 in range. It's staying in the range 1 to 13. So again exit it out from this debugging mode, and then now again start this debugging, and then I will say now I is 0. So now it will hit this breakpoint. So now it has, because I is meeting this particular if condition now, so now it has hit this breakpoint. Now we have come out from that context. So that's the reason, because I have defined this break statement after the break statement. So that's the reason it wasn't getting executed. So now if I'll change my position of this break hit, so now whenever the break will hit, I'll get the printout. So that was the mistake. So thanks guys for watching this video, and please provide a positive feedback in the comment section, and let me know in the comments if you want me to create a new video on any specific topic. If you have learned something new, please like the video and subscribe this channel, as there will be some new video releases every week, and this will be a huge support for me.